Welcome back to this evening edition. This is the daily debate, our daily debate throughout Syria's two-year civil war, and especially in the last week since the alleged chemical attack, the U.S. and Russia have come increasingly head-to-head. Tonight, joining me here in the studio is Alex Selsky, former Russian language advisor, media advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming here. And Barbara Opel-Rome. Right? I said it right.
Absolutely.
Bureau Chief for Defense News magazine. And we will be discussing whether the U.S. and Russia are on a brink, we can say, of a civil war. Barbara. Of a Cold War, I'm sorry.
The Cold War, that, absolutely. Yeah. Well, even President Obama said, and this really irked Putin, that he has one foot still in the Cold War. And that was very inconsiderate and not a politically acceptable thing to say. I understand that Putin took it very personally. He also characterized the Russian leader as the kid in the back of the classroom that doesn't really want to pay attention and wants to make trouble. That's really something that's quite unheard of. And in fact, I believe that the personal animosity is probably at an historic all-time low.
Alexander, how come the situation between the U.S. and Russia deteriorated so much in the last few months, or maybe in the last year?
Well, first of all, I don't think, I'm optimistic to be honest, I don't think that we're in some kind of a stage of getting back to a Cold War. I think that Russia cannot afford to be isolated in any way. Russia is very interested not only to import but to export. Today, Russia is the biggest exporter of oil and biggest exporter of gas to Europe. But it is, as you said, it is some continuation of this aspiration to be a superpower, to be respected, to be more understood, to be a very visible. And again, it is a superpower. It is one of the members of the Security Council of the United Nations. And I think that on one hand, it's kind of we see again this contrarian policy of Russia in many cases to the United States. But I think that Russia will not go too further. I think again that this page we feel, after the Syrian conflict, but I think that it's only maybe sample, maybe too far, but sample, but not a big picture that can speak about, Russia going back to this war all over the world. I think
no, and
exactly. It wants to be a superpower, but more regionally today and more economically than geopolitically all over the world.
But a country that wants to be superpower has to gain trust and has to gain, I believe, has to gain trust and has to gain maybe, let's say, have better public relations than it already has. And from what we're seeing lately, and from Putin's and Russia's reaction to Syria and to the alleged chemical weapon use in Syria, it's not actually helping Russia.
Yes, but I think that when you're saying that, you're judging Russia by Western eyes. Russia, it touches almost every part of the world, from Europe in the north and in the east, and Asia and Central Asia and the United States, back to Alaska. So I think that when we look on Russia by Western eyes, we don't misunderstand it, because a very big part of Russia is a very European, very Western, culturally definitely. But in terms of, I think many of the mentality of Russia is very Asian, very old-fashioned, and we should understand that, respect that. We can have an opinion, but we should first understand that it's not, we see Russia from one angle. Russia has many angles, and we should see it. It's very multicultural and a very, very deep understanding of it in many spheres of business, of politics, and culture.
It's interesting. It's interesting and ironic.
Are we maybe a little bit patronizing in a way?
It could be, but what I wanted to say about it's ironic that Obama entered office with the thought of having a reset in U.S. relations with Russia. And despite all the good faith and the respect and the acknowledgement that Russia indeed must be a partner and is a key actor on the world stage, events have evolved and unraveled to the point that, we had there's the missile defense issue between the U.S. and Russia, which is very, very problematic. And there's still the residual NATO expansion issue that rankles the Russians. And there's what's become so personal, and it's just a poor lack of leadership, I would say, on the part of both gentlemen, on the part of both leaders, is that it has become so personal. The Snowden affair certainly
didn't help.
It certainly didn't help things, and had the two countries not had all that baggage, I truly believe there would have been a higher chance of having some type of a negotiated settlement in Syria with Russia right there on board.
So who should we blame? Who's the one to blame? Is it Russia or is it the United States?
There's enough blame to share, I would say.
Definitely right. I think that, I less believe in personal misunderstandings. I believe in interests. And I think that the gap of interest is a very big gap of interest in the region of Central Asia, gap of interest. Russia understands that. China is running, before everybody and before maybe the United States in 5, maybe even 3 years. So it, again, shifts the head to the Asia.
It's looking for a better ally? It's looking for a stronger ally?
It's not looking. I think that Russia and
It's
China
seeing
are
a bigger
together
ally?
back, then. And again, you should understand, Russia has one of the longest borders with China. They don't have to market themselves to Chinese. They are very good friends. Exactly as China may speak to Germany, it can speak to China and to Japan even, okay?
Alex, and that's interesting what you say about China, because I was talking with an official at the State Department just last week who's involved in defense and space policy for the United States, and he said if there's any potential bridge, it is the common concern, the American and Russian common concern about Chinese attempt to dominate space with anti-satellite capabilities. So that's one silver lining in this very dark cloud that is complicating, of course, the Syrian issue that we're expecting.
Maybe we can let's try to look at the United States in this issue. Maybe the lack of interest, or maybe the lack of emphasis that the Obama administration put on foreign policy in the last few years. Maybe that what brought the situation to get where it got.
Neglect, you mean
Yes.
neglect.
Yes.
That was a nice way of saying, did they? Listen, if you look back at the administration of Bush, President Bush, the son, he had Condoleezza Rice, who was a Sovietologist.
That's right.
And with all of her expertise and all of her big curriculum vitae, things were pretty bad. But they were bad on a level of interest. This time, with Obama and Putin, I believe that things are bad because there's just such a lack of chemistry, almost like the lack of chemistry between Prime Minister Netanyahu and
Barack Obama.
And what Alex said, getting back to your very good point, is that certainly at the end of the day, national interest should prevail. Leaders should get over it. Bridges should be rebuilt, and and focus on where the commonality lies.
Alex.
No, I definitely agree, but I just want to say I think that that the leadership in Russia somehow represents also, the overall spirit of the Russian people, who, always we say that Russia always have this, to be aspiration of a superpower, even if the children don't have enough to eat. So and in this thing, they do go back, to
But
19.
Alexander, maybe he took the part of the bad boy a little bit too far. Putin.
Again, how you
Because
judge?
he
how
is
judge-
playing a little bit hard to get. He is playing a little bit kind of a game that he's seeing right now, especially in the current situation in Syria, that he's not getting the support that he maybe wanted to get.
But how you judge who is bad, who is good, where to count from? I mean, everybody plays the game that you're speaking about. You know, the real politic, Russians didn't invent it. You know, Americans play the same. You know, the one that canceled the meeting was not Putin but Obama. So everybody plays the same game.
Although Putin did not show up at the G8 meeting.
It's the same game.
It's a tit for
It's just the
tat,
same,
and it's ridiculous.
Exactly. It's the same game.
Let's hope that the G20 meeting in St. Petersburg next week, because of this situation boiling over in Syria. I know that the summit is primarily economically, and it's focused on economic and trade issues, but we're not going to be able to ignore the geopolitics. And I certainly would hope and expect people say that just a bilateral meeting is not now scheduled. Let's hope that changes.
Yes.
I'll just conclude. I'm definite that things will go much better. And, you know, representing today, I'm here also as a CEO of the World Forum Russian-Speaking Jew, representing, you know, Russian-speaking Jews all over the world. There are 1 million in the West and 1 million in the East. And believe me, the group of people that will be most, you know, worried by the situation, not the Russian-speaking Jews. So we really hope that it will not go back, and, you know, and it will be a bridge and open relationship.
Let's try to assume or to think or that in a case that the U.S. will attack in the next few days in Syria, how it will affect the already bad relationship between the U.S. and Russia.
Again, I think that everything is a matter of interests, and interests of today can be not the interest of tomorrow. So I don't want to run, you know, too fast and some kind and think what will exactly happen. We don't know what will exactly happen. We never knew, by the way, in any American attack what exactly will happen after. Not in Iraq, not in Afghanistan. It's a very, very, very complicated issue to forecast.
Old military truism. You know how you're going to go in, and you have no idea how you're coming out. Fog of war.
Exactly. So I think that we should see and understand that every day the situation will be judged by the interest of the powers at the same day, and that's how they think, I'm sure.
And you started optimistic this discussion. I'm not hearing you optimistic right now.
I'm optimistic again by the fact that I'm talking about the interests and not, you know, some long-going egos. I think that, you know, at the moment that the interests are together, the situation
How
will
do
be
you
better.
solve this ego problem between two big leaders who are not willing to back up?
Well, that's exactly as Alex said. They have to realize their interests. Now, Russia has a navy. Its last remaining naval base in the Mediterranean in Tartus in Syria. There was a tactical piece of advice that came out, a piece of information, I should say, that came out of Washington today, and that is that that whole area is not going to be in the target set of any type of probable standoff surgical campaign that is being planned for Syria. So that's one thing. I've also, today, there was an announcement that Russia is evacuating a lot of their non-combatants, their citizens and technical people. So they're trying to avoid a face-off. The two leaders, despite their big egos, realize that they have tremendous interests to protect, and I don't think that it's going to get into brinkmanship. And we certainly should look at the summit in St. Petersburg to see if maybe there will be more of a meeting of the minds.
So how this broken relationship between the U.S. and Russia is... Actually, I wanted to ask you another question, but they're telling me that I have only 30 seconds, 16 minutes just passed very fast.
I would just
One
say
last
that
statement.
I really hope that both powers, you know, respecting each other in this crisis will understand how they should expect Israeli interest and not
Exactly what I wanted to ask you, how it's going to affect Israel, the moment, how this crisis is going to affect Israel, but unfortunately we don't have more minutes. Thank you. Another time. We don't have any more minutes. Thank you very much for coming here and joining me here in the studio. We're going out for another